Savannah Bishop startled awake to the shriek of her cell phone at 2 a.m. Her heart hammered as she slid out of bed, terrified it might be the hospital calling about her father. For weeks, she had been waiting for the news that her family's illustrious empire, Bishop West Holdings, was about to lose its founder and guiding force. As she answered, the only words on the other end of the line were, "He doesn't have much time left. You'd better come now." So, chills rushed up her spine, not because she dreaded losing a parent, but because she recognized the undertone in her brother's voice. This wasn't a final farewell. It was an opening salvo in a war for control. A night at the hospital. Savannah arrived at Memorial Mercy in downtown Boston, still wearing the wrinkled clothes she'd grabbed off a bedroom chair. Outside her father's room, she encountered a swarm of uneasy relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles, hovering like vultures awaiting a wounded animal's last breath. Instead of hushed sadness, she sensed relentless calculation. No tears, no clasped hands in prayer, only muttered inquiries about the will, and sideways glances filled with suspicion. When she finally stepped inside the dim, sterile room, she saw her father, Charles Bishop, hooked to an array of blinking machines. His once robust frame appeared frail against the hospital sheets. Her older brother, Gregory West, stood near the bed with his arms folded. He gave Savannah the barest nod, like a businessman acknowledging a competitor at a conference. That was exactly what he was. Despite being siblings, they had spent the past decade circling each other like rival CEOs, each convinced they were destined to lead the Bishop West dynasty. From the corner of the room, a tall man in a dark suit cleared his throat. Savannah recognized him as Ambrose Willett, her father's longtime attorney. He clutched a worn briefcase that likely contained partial drafts of the estate plan. She opened her mouth to greet him, but he simply inclined his head in acknowledgement. Gregory's stare flickered between Ambrose and Savannah. "They're prepping Dad for more scans," he said, sounding resigned. "We won't get any clarity tonight." His voice might have held some faint sorrow, but it was overshadowed by raw ambition. She knew that tone. He saw this as a transitional phase, a moment to jockey for position. The patriarch's empire. Charles Bishop had started with a single trucking firm in the outskirts of Boston, only to expand into logistics, manufacturing, and real estate. Years later, he joined forces with James West, who had married into the Bishop line and shared the same relentless drive for success. Together, they formed Bishop West Holdings, a conglomerate that owned a string of warehouses along the eastern seaboard, a handful of small tech startups, and an upscale apartment complex in Manhattan. Within one generation, the family soared from a modest local enterprise to a nationally recognized powerhouse. Savannah grew up in an environment where board meetings replaced bedtime stories. She once spent her 9th birthday at an acquisitions conference in Denver, learning more about stock portfolios than about riding bicycles. Gregory, 4 years older, learned every aspect of business strategy from their father's right-hand men: mergers, buyouts, expansion deals, so that by the time he hit his 20s, he was hailed as the natural heir. Meanwhile, Savannah carved out her own niche with modern marketing tactics and brand alliances. She built an online presence, turning the family name into a lifestyle label. Both siblings excelled, but each believed they were the one worthy of ultimate control. Whispers of a new will. One day after Charles's hospitalization, Savannah met with Ambrose Willett in his plush office on the 17th floor of a gleaming downtown tower. Sunlight streamed through enormous windows, illuminating the polished wood and deep green leather chairs. "I appreciate you making time," Savannah said, sinking into one of the seats. She aimed for an air of calm, though her nerves jangled. "I'd like to understand if my father changed the corporate succession plan." Ambrose adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. "Your father mentioned making a few amendments," he replied. "We've had conversations, but nothing is finalized. If he passes before signing anything definitive, the prior estate documents remain in force." "Which means Gregory automatically becomes CEO," Savannah finished, voice wavering slightly. The attorney shrugged. "He's the eldest child and was designated as primary successor under the old guidelines, which also name your brother as the interim chairman. Yet your father told me he admired how you expanded brand recognition." He might have wanted a dual leadership arrangement. She scowled. Might have wanted? His gaze flickered. Your father was unpredictable, especially recently. Before he was admitted, he spoke of forcing you and Gregory to collaborate, or else risk seeing the entire fortune placed in a trust for charitable causes. Nothing is certain until it's signed. Savannah's stomach twisted, a threat to push everything into a charitable trust if they couldn't cooperate? It wouldn't be out of character for Charles to deliver an ultimatum. He'd done so more than once. Meanwhile, Gregory wouldn't hesitate to manipulate the situation. She thanked Ambrose and left, determined to uncover her brother's next move. A tense board gathering. Later that week, Bishop West Holdings convened an emergency board session to address leadership concerns if Charles didn't recover soon. Savannah arrived early, scanning the lavish conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Boston skyline. A long, mahogany table gleamed under subdued lighting. Leather-bound folders awaited each member, containing partial financial statements and an agenda item labeled Contingency Strategies. Gregory entered 5 minutes later, wearing a tailored suit and a confident smirk. Several board members drifted toward him, offering sympathetic smiles and supportive handshakes. Savannah recognized the tactic. He was leveraging personal relationships to cement his authority. As soon as the meeting began, the CFO delivered a somber report on financial forecasts. Then, the discussion shifted to the question everyone dreaded. How do we proceed if Mr. Bishop does not return to the office? Gregory cleared his throat. Our father named me his immediate successor in the original corporate charter. While we hope he recovers, we must ensure stability. That means confirming me as interim CEO. Savannah leaned forward. I believe the language states that role remains subject to a final estate plan. Father wanted to reevaluate leadership roles. Until that's clarified, we should wait before making anything permanent. A hush fell. Several board members seemed torn, flipping through documents. Others fixed their attention on the siblings, bracing for a confrontation. At last, the CFO weighed in, choosing his words carefully. We can name an acting CEO for day-to-day operations, but keep the door open if Mr. Bishop had intended new provisions. Gregory exhaled, forcing a conciliatory smile. Fine, let's do that, but I'll fulfill the interim post, correct? No one objected. A swirl of annoyance churned in Savannah's gut. She understood the board's logic. They wanted consistency, and Gregory was the older child. Her father's rumored revisions carried no legal weight unless signed. Still, she wasn't about to let everything fall into her brother's lap. She suspected sabotage or a cunning scheme lurking beneath Gregory's polished exterior. Allies and double agents. With Gregory poised to step into the top position, Savannah reached out to a few executives she trusted, hoping to gauge their loyalty. She invited Alicia Dunn, the marketing director, to a chic restaurant near Faneuil Hall. Over a plate of grilled salmon, Savannah probed gently, seeking hints about board politics. Alicia picked at her meal, frowning. Between you and me, Gregory's been calling private staff meetings. He's negotiating new contracts without your input. People are on edge. He insists it's for corporate momentum. Savannah sipped her iced tea, anger simmering. He's trying to lock down partnerships so nobody can challenge his direction. Alicia nodded. And it's working. Investors prefer a clear hierarchy. They hate uncertainty. After dinner, Savannah thanked Alicia for her candor, though her mind spun with fury. If her brother preemptively finalized major deals, he'd fortify his claim once Charles was gone. She needed to halt his progress, or at least match it with her own initiative. At the same time, a text message buzzed on her phone. It was from a contact in human resources. Gregory is ordering background checks on all executives who are loyal to you. Watch your back. Shaken, she realized this was no game. Her brother was systematically undermining her support network. Subtle sabotage. 2 days later, Savannah found herself locked out of the digital records for the company's West Coast expansion. Any attempt to access documents from her laptop triggered a restricted authorization notice. Immediately, she suspected Gregory. Normally, both siblings enjoyed top-tier clearance to all files. She stormed upstairs to the IT department. A nervous technician met her in the hallway. I'm sorry, Ms. Bishop. We received instructions from Mr. West to limit certain data in the interest of confidentiality. Confidential from the co-owner's daughter? Savannah snapped. On what grounds? The technician cringed. He said it was a strategic project that only the designated interim CEO and his immediate team should view. Hot rage coursed through her. Unlock it! Immediately! He averted his gaze. My hands are tied. If you want me to keep my job, I can't override the directive. Pushing past her urge to unleash fury, Savannah gritted her teeth. Fine, she said icily, spinning on her heel. This was further proof Gregory aimed to isolate her from top-level planning. She'd have to find another way in. Secretly, she hoped to gather evidence of wrongdoing, any breach of fiduciary duty or unethical dealings that might void his claim. Father's confession. That night, Savannah paced her penthouse apartment, restless. At 11 p.m., an unfamiliar number lit up her phone. She nearly ignored it, but instinct compelled her to answer. A whispery voice came through. Savannah, it's Dad. Her pulse surged. Dad? You're calling? From the hospital? He sounded weaker than ever. Nurse stepped out, so I took the phone. I want you to know something. I'd planned to revise everything, but there's a hidden clause. Ambrose can explain. Tears blurred her vision. A hidden clause? I don't understand. A ragged cough crackled on the line. I told Ambrose about the changes I wanted, how you both should lead together, but I left a back door. If either one of you engages in acts that jeopardize the company's reputation, they'll lose any stake. Chills skittered down Savannah's spine. So if Gregory tries something underhanded, his breathing came heavy. He could forfeit everything. After a long pause, he added, in the safe deposit box at the Addison Bank. A letter clarifies it. Find it. Hurry. I'm sorry. This is my last chance to do right by you. The line went silent except for the faint beep of a hospital monitor. She realized he'd hung up or dropped the phone. Unsure if this was a feverish rant or her father's final confession, she sank to the floor, mind racing. She had to locate that letter. Race to the letter. Next morning, Savannah rushed to Addison Bank. She found Ambrose Willett in the lobby wearing the same dark suit, holding a key to the safe deposit area. Your father alerted me, he said quietly. Though this is highly unusual, let's go. He escorted her to a secure room, opening a small metal box. Inside lay a sealed envelope with Charles's signature across the back. Savannah tore it open, heart pounding. The letter contained a single-page addendum typed and notarized. It explained that if either child utilized harmful tactics or placed personal ambition above the family empire's integrity, the entire inheritance would funnel into a charitable trust. The text read, should irrefutable evidence of malicious intent surface, that heir shall be disqualified, awarding full stewardship to the other. Savannah's hands shook. If she could prove Gregory's sabotage, she could inherit the entire estate, but the same risk applied to her. Any unethical scheme on her part might forfeit everything. Her father had set a cunning trap, ensuring both siblings would fear crossing the line. Ambrose studied her expression. This note has no effect unless attached to the main estate plan, but it's a powerful statement of your father's wishes. I suspect Gregory is unaware it exists. However, you'll need solid proof if he's indeed violating ethical standards. She closed her eyes, recalling the restricted files, hush-hush deals, locked computer access. I'll find proof, she said softly. Gregory is playing dirty, and I'll show that to the board. Gathering evidence, over the next week, Savannah quietly collaborated with Alicia Dunn and a trustworthy IT manager named Roberto. They combed through peripheral systems for any hint of Gregory's under-the-table contracts. Late one evening, Roberto discovered a hidden directory containing suspicious emails between Gregory and a potential buyer for the West Coast division, a private equity firm infamous for hostile takeovers. Gregory's messages hinted he would sell off a portion of Bishop West Holdings for personal gain, ignoring the company's long-term strategy. Armed with this information, Savannah felt triumphant. Selling off critical assets behind the family's back was exactly the type of disloyalty that could trigger her father's penalty clause. Yet she proceeded cautiously, waiting for the right moment to reveal everything. Showdown on the 40th floor. When the board met once again to finalize Gregory's authority as interim CEO, Savannah made her move. The meeting took place on the 40th floor of the Bishop West Tower. A panoramic view of Boston's skyline served as a dramatic backdrop. Gregory opened with a confident speech, citing stable earnings and suggesting the group approve him to helm the enterprise indefinitely. "With Dad incapacitated, we need permanent leadership," he proclaimed. Before anyone could vote, Savannah rose, clearing her throat. "I have evidence that Gregory's been negotiating a covert deal to dispose of our West Coast assets at below market value. If he proceeds, it jeopardizes both the enterprise and its legacy." Gasps rippled around the table. A furious flush crept across Gregory's cheeks. "That's a lie." She tapped the conference screen, displaying a thread of emails bearing his signature and timestamps. "This is your address, correct? These are your words, referencing a hush-hush sale to Summit Equity?" Murmurs erupted. The CFO's face turned ashen. Alicia Dunn stepped forward, validating the authenticity of the messages. Meanwhile, the general counsel frowned, flipping through pages Savannah had provided. Gregory tried to rally. "Father told me to streamline underperforming sectors. That's all this is." The CFO shook his head. "But we're not underperforming on the West Coast. Selling it to known corporate raiders could dismantle the entire brand." At that moment, Savannah produced her father's hidden clause. She read it aloud, her voice quivering with both excitement and sorrow. "Should any heir knowingly compromise the best interests of Bishop West Holdings, that individual will forfeit all claims." Then she fixed Gregory with a fierce stare. "This means your actions endanger your right to inherit anything. If Dad passes, you might lose it all." He gaped at the notarized statement, color draining from his face. Several board members exchanged stunned looks, uncertain how to proceed. Then, one of them, an older woman who had been on the board since Charles's first expansions, spoke softly. "We must suspend Gregory's authority until we investigate these allegations." Fallout and consequences. Within hours, word spread that Gregory West was implicated in a secret sale plan. A flurry of frantic calls and canceled contracts ensued. Rumors swirled through every department, pitting employees into quiet speculation about which sibling would emerge victorious. Gregory retreated to his corner office, refusing interviews, presumably scrambling to salvage his reputation. Savannah tried not to revel in the moment. She still worried her brother would strike back. Yet for all his bluster, he lacked a counterpunch. The evidence was too damning. The board convened a short meeting that afternoon, deciding to install an independent manager as acting CEO until Charles either recovered or passed. Meanwhile, the CFO insisted on halting any West Coast transactions. That evening, Savannah received a call from Ambrose. His voice sounded weary, yet relieved. "Your father might not last long, but I think he found peace in learning you exposed the wrongdoing." Gregory crossed the line. She swallowed hard, tears pricking her eyes. "Does he know everything?" "He knows enough. When I visited him at the hospital, he said this proves his children are more than greedy power seekers, that at least one of them still protects the business." A painful lump rose in her throat. She thanked Ambrose and ended the call, a swirl of emotions surging. Guilt, sadness, and a flicker of triumph. Father's legacy. Late the next afternoon, Charles Bishop took his final breath. The hospital phoned each child. Gregory never showed up. Savannah arrived to find her father's bed empty. Nurses had already moved him to the morgue. A hush enveloped the hallway. She stood there, eyes stinging, recalling how he once taught her to read stock quotes off the newspaper at age 7. Funeral arrangements proceeded swiftly. Family members convened in Boston for a solemn memorial. Gregory appeared only once, slipping into the chapel and then exiting without speaking to anyone. Savannah recognized the shame etched across his features. He had gambled everything and lost. The final reading. 1 week later, Ambrose Willett gathered the immediate family in a quiet room at his law office for the official reading of Charles's last will and testament. Savannah, Gregory, and 2 distant relatives took seats around a polished table. Ambrose cleared his throat. "In accordance with Mr. Bishop's wishes, we attach the addendum referencing disqualifying misconduct." Given the strong evidence of Gregory West's attempt to sabotage corporate holdings, the board deems that an ethical breach. Gregory's jaw tensed. I disclaim any wrongdoing. My father's voice isn't here to confirm. Ambrose held up a hand. We have written statements from board members, digital evidence, and an internal investigation. It meets the burden of proof for the addendum. Therefore, your interest in Bishop West Holdings is revoked. A hush followed. Gregory went pale, trembling with suppressed rage. At last, Ambrose continued. All controlling shares passed to Savannah Bishop. However, your father left a modest trust for you, Gregory, separate from the corporate realm. This includes enough to live comfortably, but you'll have no authority over the corporation. Gregory shot up from his chair, face taut. A modest trust? After all my work? This is preposterous. Yet he had no recourse. The final documents were in black and white. Ambrose, flanked by the CFO and the general counsel, stood as an impenetrable wall of legality. Gregory stormed out, slamming the door, leaving a lingering echo of bitterness. A new era. A few days later, Savannah stepped into her father's old office on the 38th floor of Bishop West headquarters. The place felt strangely empty, the massive desk cleared of personal items. A portrait of Charles with a proud grin still hung on the wall. She touched its frame, heart heavy yet determined to honor his efforts. The CFO dropped by, offering a respectful nod. Congratulations on assuming full leadership, he said gently. We all hope you'll carry on the legacy in the right spirit. Savannah closed her eyes, remembering her father's stern but loving guidance. He had created a labyrinth of clauses and conditions so that only the child who truly put the company first would inherit. She stood at that crossroads, vowing to safeguard what he built. At her first executive briefing, she confirmed that no immediate layoffs or rushed sales would occur. Instead, she planned to reinvest in marketing, refine expansions, and foster a culture of integrity among the staff. Applause greeted her remarks. In that moment, she sensed the weight of her father's empire settle on her shoulders, a mix of pride and responsibility. Weeks passed as Savannah navigated transitions, forging alliances with key board members and restoring morale. Occasionally, she glimpsed Gregory's name in financial tabloids, rumored to be launching a minor competitor or seeking foreign investors. His threats of lawsuits fizzled, overshadowed by clear evidence of wrongdoing. One crisp Saturday morning, Savannah drove to the cemetery. The late autumn sun cast golden rays across rows of carved headstones. She found her father's grave, kneeling to place a bouquet of white roses. Her reflection shimmered in the polished granite inscription. Charles Bishop, innovator and father. She spoke softly, voice catching. Dad, I'm sorry we couldn't be the united team you wanted, but I promise, I'll guard your vision. A breeze stirred, rustling nearby leaves as if in gentle acknowledgement. Standing up, she wiped away a stray tear. The world beyond that quiet resting place was hers to shape. A kingdom of shipping lines, factories, and digital platforms that carried her family name. In time, she would transform it further, forging a path none of them had predicted. One built on a lesson her father had engraved with finality. True power does not come from sabotage or manipulation. It grows from dedication, honor, and the unwavering courage to do what's right.